Right, Bazza, it has been 3 years or so, was it, since you last came on? It must have been, because
It's
I was
got to be, yeah.
downstairs on the bottom floor of this house in a tiny dark office with no windows. And you were at Cortex Consulting. So, Bazza, how have you been since then? What's been happening? What's occurring?
What's occurring? I feel like that should have been asked with a Welsh accent, to be honest with you.
What's
But
oh, Bazza,
oh,
what's occurring?
uh, um, yeah. I mean, a lot's changed. So Cortex is no more. So yeah, I mean, it still exists. I haven't actually done all the legal stuff to shut it down yet. But I'm not trading. I'm not operating independently anymore. So I joined B Digital on a permanent basis at the beginning of March. I mean, to be honest, I don't know about yourself, but I've found the freelancing market is getting increasingly challenging through, I mean, tax rules that HMRC have introduced gradually over the last few years. We're not going to really go into that in too much detail here, obviously. And various other things. I think the whole contract market is changing in our industry. And I'll be honest, I got to the point in my career where I thought, you know what, I'd really like to take a permanent role for the rest of my career. I'm into my 50s now. It'd be nice to actually take a permanent role, focus on what I do best, which is obviously licensing, SAM, ITAM stuff, and not necessarily have to put quite as much of a focus on finding the next engagement. Obviously, I'm a big part of pre-sales at B Digital, and as you've probably seen from LinkedIn, I do a lot of marketing stuff as well with B Digital. So yeah, it's so there's still that element of it, but it's not just me trying to find work now. There's a whole sales team and marketing team behind it as well. I mean, why did I choose B Digital? It's I love their culture. I've worked with them a couple of times on projects in the past. They're a great bunch of people. And it meant I got to work finally with someone who's been a friend of mine for a number of years, but we've never worked together, and that's a friend of yours as well, Jeff Worsley, who is now my boss. So
Oh, what nice,
yeah. Well,
nice. How's that dynamic?
It's great actually. We have a really good working relationships, very open. We frequently do talk about almost anything work related. But yeah, no, it is really good, and again, that's what I love about the B Digital culture as well, because it's a relatively small organisation, and it's quite flat in terms of its structure. So there's easy access to the people at the top as well, and you can talk to them about anything. It's really enjoyable, I have to say.
And Baz, for those that aren't aware, who exactly are B Digital?
So B Digital was founded just over a decade ago by a gentleman called Paul Matthews, who's still our CEO. So he, it was mainly around sort of technical transformation, business transformation, working with a lot of customers and organisations to help them transform their businesses from a digital capacity. In more recent years, they've become more involved in IT asset management, which came off the back of a project that I worked with them on, actually. First time I worked with them back in 2019, 2020, with a government customer. And yes, off the back of that, they've become much more ITAM focused, and actually looking to spread wings in that business at the moment. So, I mean, we do a range of things. So we have anything from large scale ITAM transformations, which we're doing. We do have one in flight with a large customer at the moment, to what would be regarded as more tactical engagement. So coming in, doing renewal support, looking at ELPs, cost optimization. I mean, we are very cost focused, cost optimization where we can. So. Yeah, it's great because I get the opportunity to play to my strengths, but I'm also not pigeonholed into one narrow set of skills. I can sort of do almost anything that would generally be sitting under the ITAM banner.
Nice, mate. Glad you found a good home to hang your hat on and not have to keep trying to find clients and stuff with Cortex.
Absolutely, mate. Absolutely.
And
It's
yeah,
it's really working out well at the moment.
and working with a mate like Jeff as well. Come on.
Yeah, and the other thing as well, which I really enjoy, is we have some young up and coming guys coming into the
Oh,
ITAM industry. I mean, B Digital has a really great graduate scheme as well, so we have some young up and coming guys who've been around for a few years. They are really grasping the opportunity they have, because obviously with two, how can I put it politely, seasoned pros like Jeff and myself, who've been around for a long time, we've got a lot of knowledge that we can pass on. So that's another great thing that I've been allowed to do is actually support some of the younger guys with training and helping them upskill and everything as well, which is something I really enjoy as well.
Nice mentorship, brilliant.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. Absolutely, it's all good fun.
But Baz, I mean that probably puts me nicely into our first question, because goodness knows what these people that you're mentoring think of some of the licensing changes that are going on at the moment. I mean, talk about putting them into the fire pit straight away. But you mentioned about your licensing expertise. Absolutely one of the best in the business. You probably know more about licensing than a lot of people that I know, and the broad spectrum as well of the vendors that you know about, not just one particular vendor. You seem to be able to nail all of them. But today, what on earth is going on with VMware? You yourself have been posting a lot about it on LinkedIn. Barry's
Absolutely.
links, by the way, will be in the description. He posts. There seems to be changes all the time that he's posting about and sharing. But mate, what is going on?
Great question. Great question. I mean, let's be honest. It's been an interesting journey, hasn't it? Over the last, what are we talking now? Nearly 2 years since they confirmed. So it's just over 18 months since they actually confirmed the deal, and then a month later they introduced their first raft of big changes. December 2023, and they said, right, no more perpetual licenses, we're only going to sell subscriptions, we're bundling everything to make it simpler. I think what we need to focus on, and this is something I actually said at a conference last year when I was doing a session on VMware, at the end of the day, what we need to bear in mind, Broadcom have invested significantly in VMware. I mean, the cost was, I think it was $61 billion to buy VMware, though they also inherited $8 billion of debt that VMware was carrying. So it was a nearly $70 billion purchase, all told. At the end of the day, everything they've done is about driving up revenue. They need to try and make that money back somehow. So revenue's been driven up by the bundling, because obviously with, for example, let's take the flagship VMware Cloud Foundation bundle. It has everything in there, and Broadcom are sort of I use the word incentivizing, but they're incentivizing customers to take the VCF bundle and often buying products they don't really need on a subscription model, because it's more heavily discounted than some of the others. And again, it's all just about driving the revenue up. I mean, VCF, when you think about it, contains all of the key infrastructure products, but there are customers that don't always need them all. But if you need, so obviously any of the bundles, you get vSphere and you get vCenter. Yeah. You get that across the board with VCF, VVF. There's vSphere Enterprise Plus, there's vSphere Standard. All of those include vCenter and vSphere, right? Now, with the bigger bundles, so VVF, you get an element of ARIA Suite in there. I think you get ARIA Suite Standard in there. With VCF, you get ARIA Suite Enterprise. But you get all of the other stuff as well. You get NSX networking, you get hybrid cloud extender, you get data services manager, you get software defined data center manager, all of this stuff in there as well. Now, if you only need one of those, so let's say, for example, if you only need vSphere, vCenter, and let's say NSX networking, you have to buy that whole bundle. Which to my mind is a little bit naughty. Getting a customer to buy something they don't need, but it is what it is. But on top of that, there's the metric changes. They've gone from the CPU metric, which most people will know for many years was VMware's core metric, until they introduced the processor licensing restriction a few years ago. I think about 2020 now, just before COVID, where they said, right, you can only use a single license on a processor with up to 32 cores. Because obviously, as we've seen in the industry over the last decade, there's been a wholesale trend towards core licensing, as software vendors have realised that core CPUs are getting more and more powerful, and instead of CPU counts going up, it's core counts going up. So VMware, I think, were one of the last of the big vendors to actually get to that party when they introduced the 32 core restriction. And then August 2023, after Broadcom's intent to acquire had been announced, VMware introduced the subscription upgrade program, which was their first stab at subscription licensing, and also introduced the core metric, which Broadcom grasped with both hands and have taken forward. So, all of the former processor metric products are now measured in cores, pretty much, with one exception, and we'll come to that in a minute. And there's also a core requirement, so you have to purchase 16 core licenses minimum for every processor, even if the processor has fewer than 16 cores. And obviously if it's got more than 16 cores, you buy for the number of cores you actually have in your estate. So, that's quite interesting.
It's like you going into a Ferrari dealership, wanting to buy a nice little die-cast model, and then them saying, no, you've got to buy a Ferrari actual car as well at the same time. Well, it's part of a bundle.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It is very much, as I say, it's all... I mean, Broadcom have marketed it as, well, we're making it simpler. I mean, and to some extent, there's an element of truth to it, because VMware's product portfolio had got really large and complex. You've only got to look through the historic product monthly product guide that was published with all their terms in, and then you see a list of products like this, and it was quite complex. So I get that element of it, but at the same time, it's a little bit disingenuous, because whilst they have simplified the product portfolio, they're also guaranteeing revenue by forcing people to buy products they don't need, subscribe to products they don't need. So it is a bit naughty,
And Baz, just before you go on to the license metric changes, with your experience in the licensing and ITAM space, when you first heard about the Broadcom VMware news, did you expect all of this to start happening? Did you have any inclinations or any feelings that there were going to be such wholesale changes like this?
I expected,
or is it taking even you by surprise?
So some of the bundling came as a bit of a surprise. I mean, Broadcom have always had a habit of, when they acquire software vendors, they will change things. And the one thing they always change, and I mean, I remember doing, and actually, ironically, it was another project I did with B Digital a few years ago, when the acquisition was announced. And there's another licensed consultant I was working with at the time in the industry, a guy called Dan Barron, who's also pretty hot on VMware. We just looked at each other and went, they're going to change it to subscription licensing, because that's what Broadcom do. Everything becomes subscription, everything. So we knew that was going to happen. I mean, in terms of the portfolio simplification, I thought there would probably be an element of it. I didn't think it would be quite to the extreme that they have done it. And the metric changes. I mean, when VMware announced the SUP program, which was core based licensing, again, it was like, right, they've done that now, so Broadcom will obviously change it to cores as well. So some of it, yes, we could see coming. Some of it, no, has taken us by surprise, I think, a little bit. So yeah, I mean, it's quite exhausting sometimes watching VMware at the moment and trying to work out what's coming next, because we have seen so many changes. So it's fun, but it is quite tiring as well. So
but yeah, exactly. For someone like you who's so hot on licensing changes, but also the fact that not only do you need to be aware of it, but you then need to understand that to support your clients and your customers at Be Digital.
Yeah,
I can imagine. And then you're doing LinkedIn posts as well to help the community and trying to translate some of this stuff into English.
Yeah,
I'm not surprised you're knackered. I mean, it's keeping you busy.
I mean, let's be honest, and I guess I should be a little bit cautious what I say here, but for me, what's going on with Broadcom and VMware licensing, it's almost an analogy of what's going on in the United States at the moment with their president, because the chaos works to their advantage, because people are unbalanced, people don't know what's coming next, and just as you get your head around one set of changes, they either change it back because there's been a backlash, which we saw with do you remember the 72 core purchase minimum, which lasted about a week or two? And there was a lot of confusion around that, because all of a sudden people think, well, do we need to buy 72 cores per socket, 72 cores per server? But it wasn't. It was just simply, when you come to us and place an order, you have to buy 72 cores of that product order. Now, for a big company or a big organisation, doesn't matter, because we're talking thousands of cores. For smaller organisations, that's an issue. And that's why Broadcom introduced it, because they wanted to get rid of. So they want to focus on enterprise customers, because that's where the revenue is, and they wanted to get rid of smaller organisations, charities and that sort of stuff. Basically, the best way they could think of to do it was just put them off buying from us. But then again, within 2 weeks, that was gone. They rescinded it because they had such negative feedback, particularly on LinkedIn. I mean, I remember one of their sales guys in the Americas put this long post. Eventually, I mean, this was about a week after they'd announced it. Put this long post saying, there's been so much misinformation about this. We've decided to clarify it. Da, 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 da. And I commented on that, and I put, look, that's really helpful. You've done that, but why has your employer not done that in the first place? Yeah. Why has it taken a load of backlash and one of the sales guys to actually come out and say, well, this is what it means, when actually you should have just been very clearly communicating that. I suppose that in that instance as well, it didn't help that the information broke from a leak as well from Arrow. So obviously Arrow are one of the world's biggest distributors, and it was an internal leak that actually broke that news. So I think the Register picked up on it, and then everyone else just picked up on it. So it might be that Broadcom weren't really ready for that info to go public, possibly. But yeah, I think they like the chaos because it keeps people guessing and it keeps people wondering what's coming next.
And it keeps you having to Google every day or getting Google alerts.
You have no idea how many times I search hashtag VMware or hashtag Broadcom on LinkedIn just to see if there's any new posts that I might have missed out on. Yeah. Because I mean, I try and keep ahead of the curve because over the years, although as you very kindly said, I work on a lot of different vendor licensing. VMware has become a bit of a hobby horse of mine, and I've become a bit of a specialist historically on their licensing as well. So yeah, I try and keep ahead of the curve on that one. So
I remember in your first interview, and that's what really struck me about because licensing for me, like, I get by, but that's not where my main interest is. It's more the ITAM, the processes, the people, all of that kind of stuff. But I remember in the first interview, and I was watching it back prepping for this, you mentioned how because you've got that technology brain, you understand how all of it works, that actually the licensing side of things kind of makes way more sense if you understand all the tech that's behind it. And you can just transfer your skills that you've learned in IBM space and go, oh, there's similarities with vendor X over here or vendor Y over there. Whereas, I don't have that brain. I don't know how you...
I come from a technical background anyway, which helps. My start in IT 25 years ago was in technical roles, and I like a lot of people, I fell into ITAM 16 years ago now, where I got outsourced from my employer to one of the big systems integrators, and they needed someone to do software asset management for that account, and I was like, well, can I work from home? And they went, yeah, cool, I'm in. And I had, I think it was a half an hour phone interview with the head of UK and Ireland software asset management. They gave me the role, and they said, be prepared, it's a steep learning curve. And I was like, yeah, that's fine, I'm good at learning new stuff, but wow, I mean, it yourself. I remember when we first met in 2013 or 14. It was when we did the CSAM course together.
Yeah, 2013.
Absolutely, and I think because you were still at Arup at the time, if my memory serves.
Yes, I was about to move to the ITAM review. That was one of my first things for the ITAM review, was reviewing that course in Harpenden, wasn't it? It was
Harpenden. Yeah, it was at ITAM's.
ITAMs.
Yeah, Hugh Skinley taught us CSAM. Yeah, good guy, Hugh. Good guy. But
yeah.
So I remember having these sort of similar conversations on what a steep learning curve we did at the time, about how difficult it always was. I mean, I think with software vendors, licensing skills are relatively transferable, because at the end of the day, the technology is the technology, isn't it? And it's just about understanding how they define things. And it's interesting, because I was writing an email yesterday, because there was a guy on LinkedIn who wanted to do a news article about licensing. So he put a call out, and I volunteered to respond, and he sent me some really good questions, and we were talking about CPU and core licensing, and I said on that, the first thing you need to understand is every vendor defines them differently. I mean, like IBM and Oracle, for example, to them a processor is actually a processor core. Although with Oracle, it also depends on the software, because Oracle Database Enterprise Edition is licensed on processor cores. Oracle Database Standard Edition is licensed on CPU sockets, although it's always still called a processor. So it's all the subtle differences, and it's like who has the core minimums, who has the processor restrictions. So it's as long as you can wrap your head around the differences between them, I think the skills are relatively transferable. But what I will say is there's always refresher stuff to be done. Tomorrow I could have a customer come and say, we need some help with open text licensing. Now, I know a lot about open text and Micro Focus licensing, but I'll still need to go and refresh stuff. Right. Because if you haven't touched something for a little while, you need to go back, check, is it up to date? You need to, have they changed any definitions? I think if I'm completely honest, the one vendor I can confidently say I'm all over at the moment is VMware and Broadcom. I think other vendors I'd probably need little dips in just to double check stuff to make sure I'm still correct on things that I've been working with for a while.
And those hourly searches for any VMware posts or news or rumours that might be coming out. Yeah.
Absolutely. It's good, because one of the things I'm really eagerly awaiting actually at the moment is an update on the VMware versus Siemens court case in America. Because that broke it 3 months ago now, and there's been no updates since. So I'm really keen to see a public statement on that at some point and see what's happened.
What do you think will happen?
I don't know. It's an interesting one, because I can't believe I'm saying this publicly. To be fair to Broadcom, they're actually right on this one. I think, in my opinion, having read it's quite sad, having read the filing.
You read the legal filing.
Yeah, I'm weird like that. It's the same part of my brain that enjoys reading contracts.
Right.
It's the bit of my brain that goes. I'm an evidence-based person, and I think that comes from years of working in an industry where data is everything, data is king, evidence is everything. I mean, when you defend an audit, you've got to be able to evidence A, your deployment data, and B, what the contract says. So for me, evidence is absolutely critical. So I will never. I'm a bit of a skeptic. I will never believe something I've read online unless it's actually come from the source. So as soon as I heard about the VMware Siemens case, I was like, right, let's find the filing and read it. Siemens made a mistake. They were trying to push Broadcom into letting them renew perpetual support for their existing license estate. They then gave them a list of software that they were using, quite a few titles of which weren't actually licensed according to VMware's records. And then Siemens made it worse by actually amending that list and making it smaller so it more closely aligned to what VMware thought they were licensed for. So I don't think they've helped themselves, really, if I'm honest.
No. But what would the outcome be? Like, just the fine for Siemens, I guess?
Well, potentially. I think... so obviously VMware wanted to conduct an audit, which Siemens just ignored. So I think most likely it'll be a forced audit, potentially. Right. I'll be honest, I don't fully understand US civil law, so I don't know if the courts have the power to audit that, power to order that. But there needs to be an established baseline of what they're actually using, I think.
Yeah, if you find if anything comes up, please do a LinkedIn post about it, because it is super interesting.
I will. I think it's got the potential to be up there with SAP versus Diageo. It's that kind of, or Oracle versus Mars. It's that kind of ruling.
That was the one. Yeah.
It's got the potential to be one of those.
Siemens v VMware, nice.
Yeah.
Actually, speaking of all the licensing changes and everything that's going on in the VMware space, and the fact that even you as a licensing expert enthusiast, we'll probably say as well, because let's be honest, you love all this kind of stuff. As a general ITAM, SAM licensing person that's out there in the wild, not with a consultant house or anything like that, what is the kind of shorter term impact for them right now with all these changes? What do they need to be looking at and aware of and mitigating, basically?
I think short term, a lot of customers have felt the pain. So
already,
because a lot of customers didn't get time to. Let's be honest. VMware has spent the last 20 years becoming the most used virtualization platform on the planet. It's historically the benchmark for everything in the virtual world. And most customers were so intrinsically entwined into it that it's not easy to pull out. I think Gartner did a report a few months back, because we wrote a white paper on it in February, that actually referenced the Gartner report, and their report said that it could be really, really expensive to migrate away from VMware. I think their baseline was anywhere between $200 and $2,000 per VM. Depending on size of estate, what you're replatforming to, what your business applications look like, that sort of thing. So I think a lot of customers have had no choice but to go into an initial subscription with Broadcom, because they just didn't get the time to actually evaluate their options properly and move away or look at other options. A few customers we've seen and have worked with have gone for third-party support, because quite a few of the third-party support companies like Spinnaker and Origina, various others now offer VMware third-party support. So a few of them have gone, right, we're going to sweat our perpetual licenses, go down the third-party support route. The one thing I would always say to customers that are considering going that way is, if you're coming out of a VMware enterprise license agreement, two things. Firstly, it will probably have a reporting clause in it. So as a standard thing with a VMware ELA they introduced some years ago, was that within 30 days of the expiration of the agreement, you had to report what licenses you were using. A lot of customers overlook that. If you do overlook it, you'll probably get audited, or you might get audited anyway. We've seen, again, quite a few customers being audited by Broadcom because they've chosen not to take out Broadcom subscriptions. And what Broadcom are looking for is obviously any excuse to force them into an agreement, because if they can just find one element of non-compliance, that's it, they've got you, and then they can force you into an agreement. So and it's, this is a sort of a standard speech. I've worked with a few customers being audited by Broadcom now, and what we're saying to them is that, if I tell you need to change something in your infrastructure, I'm not going to argue with you. There's no ifs, ands or buts, but we need that. You have to change it. If you have a non-compliance, you simply have to change it. It's that simple. But it's an interesting game at the moment. I think a lot of customers, where they have been felt pushed into a short-term agreement, are then evaluating options. So where do you want to go third-party support? Do you want to re-platform to an alternative virtualization platform? So and you may have seen this, I've seen lots of it. Nutanix and OpenStack in particular are taking advantage of the situation. I've seen lots and lots of advertising by them, trying to appeal to VMware customers and saying, like, come and re-platform with us. We'll make it painless and all that sort of stuff. So, and obviously cloud is obviously a potential option for a lot of organisations as well. But again, that presents a whole set of challenges around how you re-platform your business applications, what the licensing will look like if you decide to bring your own licenses. And then obviously you've got the FinOps dimension as well, trying to make sure you want to keep your costs to a minimum and making sure that costs are attributed to the correct cost centres internally and that sort of stuff as well. So yeah, a lot of challenges in the short term.
And I think, Baz, it's really important at this point to mention as well, if you are just an ITAM person, one-man team, one-woman team, smaller team, whatever, there's no harm in reaching out to people like yourself for clarification, or even for services, right? You don't have to... we speak about this all the time, but back in the day, it felt like if you started asking licensing questions on LinkedIn, I think people felt judged, like they didn't know what they were doing. But because it's changed so much, honestly, there is no harm in reaching out to someone like Barry just for a clarification or finding out how B Digital can help you. It's not an admission of failure or that you don't know what you're doing. It's just, it's got so complex now. You heard that Barry's hashtag VMware on LinkedIn more times than he cares to count in a day, and that's a licensing specialist. Do you know what I mean? Reach out to people like you, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And in fact, actually, this morning I've had a call with one of our customers, and VMware isn't part of the statement of work, but they have concerns around it. And they said, look, can you just help us with this? And this was around the new mandatory compliance reporting, which I posted about 2 or 3 weeks ago now. And then that changed again within 2 weeks, because what they did initially is there was seven products within the VMware Cloud Foundation buckets, so VCF, VPF, vSAN, a few others as well, where they inserted a mandatory compliance reporting clause, which basically said, every 180 days you've got to provide us with a compliance report. Now, this can be done with the software actually communicates it automatically back to Broadcom HQ, and I don't think anyone probably wants to allow that. Or you can actually do it yourself, but you have to do it in the format we specify and including the data we specify, and you have to consult the product documentation to do it. Now, that didn't go down well with their customer base, and there was quite a bit of backlash on LinkedIn about that. Hey presto, within 2 weeks, it might even have been less than that, it might have been a week, they actually changed it again. So they left the mandatory reporting clause in there, but they've now restricted it to version 9 and above. So if you're using version 8 and below of any of the products, you're okay. The moment you transition to version 9, you're then subject to that clause. And something else to bear in mind with the agreements as well, and VMware have always been a bit shifty on this. So a lot of organisations, if you're on subscription licensing or if you are on perpetual licensing with support, you wouldn't be tied to a new set of terms for a vendor until you go to renew it. That has never been the case with VMware. So in their legacy product guide, they always had a clause around, the moment you install an upgrade or a patch or anything like that, at the moment you put something new onto the software, you're then subject to a new set of terms that have been published at that time. And Broadcom have done the same. So if you install an upgrade to version 9 when you're mid-subscription, suddenly you are subject to the terms that are publicly available at that time. So it's something to be aware of. The moment you go to version 9, you have to think about mandatory compliance reporting. And the interesting thing as well, there doesn't appear to be any legal ramifications. It doesn't look, they're not threatening audit if you don't do the report. But what they will do if you don't provide the report, so it's to say it's every 180 days. If you don't provide the report, they will start blocking features of the software. So they're effectively saying you have to provide this report, or you just can't use it. End of. So yeah.
Damn, man. This is probably a really hard question based on the fact of everything that you've just said, with all of the changes that are happening, reverted, happening, changed again. But what do you think the long-term plan is here, and what do ITAM professionals need to be aware of? I mean, it's hard. I know it's a really tough question, but any idea what the long-term plan for VMware is, and what ITAM people can do to prepare for that?
I mean, I know what ITAM people can do. What Broadcom's long-term plan for VMware, I've got to be honest, is a mystery to me, because everything they're doing is irritating their customers. They are going to lose customers hand over fist. And this was something I found really interesting. When they announced their last quarterly results, they've just announced their quarterly results for up to the end of April, I think it was, right at the beginning of June or the end of May. I haven't looked at them yet, so I need to check that. But their previous set of quarterly results, and when they came out, that was also the end of their first full trading year as owners of VMware. So everyone was really keen to see them. And there was a lot of technology press and media saying, it looks like their strategy's been a success because their revenue's gone up massively and this, that and the other. And I was like, no, hang on a minute. That's a short-term success because they have strong-armed customers or basically left customers with no option but to take out these new subscription agreements. Long-term, I think that revenue is going to plummet again. I'll be honest, because there's a lot of noise and you don't always see people publicly identifying themselves. But if you have a look at websites like the Register, some of the comments under VMware articles, lots and lots of different organisations saying, we've decided we've taken this 1 year agreement or 2 year agreement, and then that's it, we're replatforming, we're getting away from them. So long term, it feels to me like most ITAM teams, most customers are just going to walk away because of the eye-watering price increases that we've seen, and the fact that, as I say, people are being forced to take products that they don't actually want to use. And the bit that puzzles me, because obviously a lot of, as I said earlier, everything that Broadcom are doing at the moment is being designed to generate the revenue, because they invested nearly $70 billion in this purchase. They want to recoup that money and obviously make a bit of profit and everything. But longer term, if they're losing customers, what does that mean for VMware? Is it going to eventually kill the platform, kill the software? I don't know. You would like to think, well, I don't know if I'd like to think, but you would think it would never actually completely die. But they are going to lose so many customers, you then think, well, what was the point in them buying VMware in the first place?
And what are the big alternatives? Like if you're an ITAM person that's potentially, like you said, got that 1-2 year agreement, it's part of your strategy now to move away from VMware. What are people typically looking to move away to?
So I think there's a variety of options. I mean, there's lots of different virtualization platforms. As I said, Nutanix and OpenStack in particular are taking advantage of the situation. But obviously, depending on what your estate looks like and what applications to support, and you've got Microsoft Hyper-V, you've got Citrix Zen Server, you've got various other. There's even some open source virtualization platforms that are becoming more popular now as well. But it all comes down to sort of key indicators like how big's your footprint, how critical are the applications you have sitting on it, how easy is it to migrate. So you've got lots of questions that need to be asked there. Or there is potentially, as I say, as a short-term measure or maybe even a long-term measure, third-party support. Now, third-party support is brilliant. It's a cost-effective way to actually get what you need out of your VMware estate. But at the end of the day, as soon as you come out of official support, you can no longer get upgrades. So what will happen is your estate gets old quite quickly. So for me, it may not necessarily work as a long-term measure, depending on what your strategy is and your roadmap for those products. If you're happy to carry on using vSphere version 8 for several more years, great. It's a great option for you. And then obviously the other potential option is as I say, is cloud. But again, you've got a whole set of challenges around migrating to cloud. And for me, long-term ITAM teams need to be involving themselves in all of this stuff. They need to be getting in with the architects, getting in with the procurement guys and supporting people with data to make the decisions that will actually enable a better outcome for their business. They need to be looking at the licensing implications of each of these different directions, looking at bring your own licensing options, looking at how things are licensed on different platforms, looking at what's the licensing models for Nutanix if you decide to go down that route. And one of the cloud options as well, which I think is interesting, and not a lot of people, I don't think it's really publicised that much, is Azure VMware solution. Now, AVS effectively has two options. It used to have one, but earlier this year, Broadcom allowed people with existing VCF subscriptions to port those subscriptions to the Azure VMware solution. But what we need to bear in mind, so AVS is basically it's private cloud. So you're using bare metal servers to host your own VMware solution. But one of the options you have is you can have Microsoft provide the VMware licenses for you. So potentially you could actually, if you want to continue with a private cloud VMware estate, you could go down that route and Microsoft provide the VMware licenses for what you need. It just means the costs you're paying for the bare metal platform are a little bit elevated compared to what you would get if you actually ported your own licenses in there.
Right. No, understood. And I think, just going back to the whole licensing point, you dip your fingers in lots of different vendors and have that expertise, but I think across a lot of them now, I saw that, I don't know if you saw it as well on LinkedIn, there was a really interesting case study about someone who basically budget challenges, obviously Teams is decoupled from the Microsoft bundling separate price that they have to pay for it. Then they move to an open source internal comms tool to get rid of that. We've seen that German province moving away from Microsoft products to open source. Like you mentioned, there's potential open source alternatives for VMware. In terms of the licensing world as a whole, and the way that the way of the world is at the moment, budgets are getting smaller. You're expected to do more with less at the moment, and vendors are increasing prices left, right, and centre. Like, as licensing as a whole, what do you think is going to happen moving forward? Not just for VMware, but everyone. Is open source going to become more prevalent as people try and save money?
Potentially. I've been working with customers for probably 10 years or more, where they actually had FLOSS policies, so free Libre and open source software policies. And I've seen more of that probably in government and public sector, where that's particularly because obviously they are very budget conscious and you're always looking to try and save money wherever possible. But the thing is that we need to bear in mind is the mistake lots of organisations make is they think open source means there's no licensing involved. And that's obviously not the case. Open source still requires licensing, and obviously it requires a different kind of licensing because open source licensing, like you take the standard general public license from the GNU project, it is very different. and how you use the product is absolutely key. And actually, I've had to defend a couple of audits in the past where customers had open source products. The particular software vendor didn't think they were using the software in a way to qualify for it being open source, so therefore required a commercial license. And I basically had to, go through the licensing agreements in detail and look at the technical architecture in detail to work out how they were using it, so that we could actually defend them. And actually, as it turned out, we got away with that one. We won that one. So yeah,
Right.
it's open source. Whilst it alleviates budgetary issues, it doesn't alleviate licensing issues. So message to CIOs and CTOs: don't think you don't need licensing people, because you will.
But it's hard, just in general, though, it's hard, isn't it? Because
Absolutely.
software's
Yeah.
increasing. People have been on 3-year agreements.
Yeah.
That I mean, I had a conversation just the end of last week where it was a case of, but we only paid X amount million per year 3 years ago when we started it. It's now a 45%, I think it was, price increase. This is
Yeah.
for Adobe. Like, why is this happening? How is that possible? Like, well, it was a very different world 3 years ago. You were price locked. They've changed their structure, they've changed their agreements, they've changed their pricing model. Oh, by the way, they know that they are integral to your business and you won't be able to move away from it anytime soon. So what are you going to do? Not pay the price increase? Or
Absolutely.
they've
Absolutely.
got you by the short and curlies a lot of the time now.
Yeah, very much so. And the things we need to bear in mind as well, at the end of the day, software vendors, software publishers, they're a business, and
Yeah, of course.
they
Yeah,
they talk to you all day long about being partners, and and we want to support your success and all the other nonsense that we hear. But at the end of the day, they need to make money. They are businesses, they want to make money. And it's all about revenue generation, and every time you see a fundamental shift in licensing, it's always because a vendor's found a way to make more money. I remember when when Microsoft shifted to core licensing. I think it was 2012 when they introduced SQL Server on a core licensing metric. And it was always, well, it's simpler for you, it's easier to count, this, that, and the other. It was always about making more money,
yeah,
because virtual SQL Server usage on virtual platforms was skyrocketing. And they wanted a method to make it easier for them to make money out of that, and that's exactly what they did. And then they followed it up with Windows Server a few years later when that shifted to core licensing as well. So, and then VMware with their 32 core restriction on processor licensing, and then going core licensing. It's always about money, at the end of the day, and that's why so many software vendors don't offer perpetual options anymore. They offer subscription only, and again, even for tier 2 vendors, where what was it? Well, it was confirmed last year, but it was the year before when OpenText sold a lot of the old Micro Focus products to Rocket Software. So things like
yeah. I saw that.
Cobol and Reflect Connect and all that sort of stuff. That straight away that went from perpetual licensing, which Micro Focus had always had as a general rule, and Rocket Software subscription. So they transitioned straight over to subscription license. And I even had one case with a customer I was working with where Rocket Software said, like, you're going to have to get subscriptions to cover your entire estate, not just this new bit you're building. I'm like, well, they've got perpetual licenses for that. Well, we don't sell support for perpetual licensing anymore. Right? That's not actually the question, though, is it?
Yeah.
So it's so you've got all these shifts in licensing, and it's always about revenue generation. And I think, at the end of the day, you can try any kind of strategies to mitigate that. You can look at ways to avoid it, and I think that is actually what licensing is all about. Once upon a time it was all about compliance. It's not,
Yeah.
and to be fair, it hasn't been for a long time. It's all about trying to reduce cost optimization. And one thing I preach to VMware customers is look at optimizing your infrastructure, because a lot of customers I've worked with, they don't have what I would call really dense virtualization environments, and obviously it depends on whether it's a production platform or whether it's non-production, test dev, whatever. But very often you see quite low ratios of VMs to hosts, of sort of like sometimes below 20-1, and vSphere is capable of hosting so much more. And I always say to customers, look at your density, look at consolidating, because at the end of the day, if you reduce your VMware footprint, you can then transmit that optimization across to other products that might be core or processor based that you're running on those platforms, like Windows Server, like Red Hat, various others. So it's something that it's always about optimization for me, and trying to save money where you can by shrinking your footprint. But longer term, at the end of the day, you just have to bite the bullet sometimes.
Nice. Now, Baz, this wasn't a question that I sent over before, but I didn't know that the
Cheeky.
digital had no, no, I didn't know that you guys had a great graduate scheme and are introducing the next generation of ITAM professional to our wonderful industry. But yeah, just talk us through a bit about that. What kind of things are you finding that they're really connecting with and getting interested in? Which bits, because I mean, when I first started, it was a very niche thing. It was the processes and stuff like that. The technology at the time, it used to be like major release from Flexera, major release from
Yeah,
Snow,
yeah.
and it used to be like
Yeah.
really cool. And what kind of things are you seeing that are getting the next generation interested in ITAM?
I mean, that's an interesting question. I mean, like most graduate schemes, B Digital actually gives graduates the opportunity to work in different areas of the business. So they can work in
Nice.
marketing, they work in sales, they can come and work with us in the ITAM team. And we've got two particular young ITAM people at the moment who are both have been with the company for about 3 years, I think now. One of them was a finance graduate, so he knows numbers really, really, really well. He knows Excel really well, and I've actually been coaching him in VMware licensing more recently.
Oh,
And it's and
cool.
it's, I mean, they've both been working on like big projects, ITAM stuff for us for a long time. And what I really love about them is they're keen to make their mark. Both of them, they're sort of like the young, rolling up their sleeves, not afraid to take anything on. Let's just get involved and get on with it, which is a fantastic attitude, I think. But where we do give them the opportunity, and I say for me the key word is coaching. We're less training them, we're more coaching them. So we give them things to do so they can increase their own knowledge. And then, I mean, I have, so what, as I say, one of them is doing VMware, the other one's doing IBM. And I'll have weekly sessions with them where we can talk through any questions they have from the material that they've been assigned to look at or watch or read or whatever. But obviously, wherever possible, we get them involved in practical engagements as well, so they can apply what they're learning. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting because, as I say, neither of them come from particular technology backgrounds, so they've become really interested in actually learning how things change according to platform and how different license terms kick in and what it means if you put something in the cloud and everything like that. And I think it just, for me, it's the fact that they're so just open and keen to learn
Yeah.
that I love. I wouldn't say there's anything particular about ITAM that seems to make them really excited. They're just really engaged in what we do, I think.
Just excited in general to be
Yeah,
working with one
absolutely,
of the best
absolutely.
licensing consultants in the land. There you go.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't describe myself as that, but I'm
I
flattered.
would. I will.
I'm
You're far
flattered.
too modest. I will describe you as that then, Baz.
You're you
Right.
are you're far too kind.
Last question, and I asked this to you when we did the interview 3 years ago,
Oh, blimey.
and I wonder what your response is going to be the same. But what about ITAM licensing, Sam? Anything to do with our industry? What motivates you? What gets you going? And yeah, why do you love it?
I think it's because it appeals to my geek brain, which I think I probably said to you 3 years ago
I
as
think you
well.
did. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've always been a bit of a geek when it comes to technology and stuff like that. And as I say, I mean, when I was in the military, I worked in comms, and then I sort of started an IT career when I started, and I've worked across different areas of IT. I've done sort of like field service engineering, so going out and fixing stuff. I've done, desk side support. I've done data center management. So I've done lots of different things with IT. And as I say, I fell into ITAM, but this is now by far the longest I've worked in any specific area of IT, and I don't know. For me, it's because it's not just technology; it's the bridge, isn't it? I've always thought ITAM is the bridge between commercial and technology, and obviously, latterly, we're seeing much more of a role in the FinOps space, where FinOps people are working much more closely with ITAM. There's a lot of overlap between the two areas. But yeah, it's I think it's the variety of what we do as well. One day you could be sitting there analysing in Excel, looking at infrastructure to work out what license required. The next day you could be, designing a process or writing a policy. The day after that you could be reading a contract or sitting down with a customer to reassure them that the audit that they've got looming on their doorstep isn't the end of the world. So it's just the sheer variety of everything we do, I think, and it just appeals to me as a long-term geek.